I'm not too good with disclaimers, so before the story starts, I just want to say that this story involves the passing away of a family member, and yeah, that's my disclaimer. I still remember the day, a fine evening of Kartik 2nd, 2066. I was merely 5 years old, playing in the ground. My mom had left me with the huge responsibility of telling my father that she and grandma was going to gather grass for the cow. We used to live in a village far away from where we are now. A family of six with me, my father, my mom, grandma, grandpa, and my sister. My parents were usually out for work for months at a time, so I used to live with my grandparents. My grandma was a loving woman, and my grandpa was less of a parent and more of a friend. I still remember those cycle rides we used to go on every Saturday. My dad returned with a terrified face. The big burden of my tiny shoulder were lifted as I told him where Mum was. With a terrified face, he told me to ask Mum to call him, and I specifically remember him telling me not to tell my grandma, and he rushed out on his bike. Mum came back, and I told her to call Dad, and she did. I could see her soul leaving her body as she was talking to my dad. The smiling, happy face turned grim. Hiding her tears behind a face smile, she told me that and grandma that dad and grandpa are going to be late. We had our dinners, and as I'm writing this, I'm left to wonder how my mom was so calm. I didn't know what was going on, and nor was I old enough to understand the gravity of what it all meant. But my mom, she knew and understood everything, and yet I can only guess what might be going on in her head. It was a cold night. We burned some wood and sat around. I was in my grandmother's lap, and I will always remember what I asked her. Where do people go when they die? I don't know why I asked this. Maybe it was just something to do with something I was about to learn the next day, or just a random thought in a 5 year old's head. But the question terrified my mom. She shouted at me to stop asking such questions. My grandma told her not to suppress a kid's curiosity and started telling me that good people go to heaven and bad one goes to hell. Well, where will I go? I asked. Of course, heaven, she replied. Where will you go? I will be waiting for you at the heaven's gate. And grandpa? That question was enough to bring tears to my mum's eye. She hid it by saying it was the smoke of the fire and went to her room. We sat off the fire and went too. She never answered the question. Next day I woke up. Nobody was home except my grandfather's brother and his wife, both with a sad face. He simply asked me to get dressed and get in the car, and so I did. Approximately 20 minutes of drive later, and we were in another of my grandfather's brother home. It was filled with people with barely any space to step. I saw my mom, so I walked up to her. I was so happy to see a familiar face, but my happiness was short lived for what I saw in front of her. My grandma was crying on my grandfather's dead body. I couldn't mourn his death, not then. I was too young to know what dying meant, to know what it felt like to lose the loved ones. I didn't even know that he was never coming back. Somebody at his funeral told me he was going for a walk, and I believed him. Maybe it was a walk. I just never thought how long the walk was going to be for. Rest in peace, Grandpa. I miss you a lot.